My name's John Davies. I'm with GreenBiz, and I'm here today with Brewster McCracken, CEO of Pecan Street, Inc.
Hey,
Brewster,
John.
welcome.
Thanks a lot.
So why don't you tell us what is Pecan Street?
We are a research consortium that brings together utilities and technology companies to carry out the nation's deepest ever consumer research on what people are using electricity to do in their homes.
So how are you doing that? I mean, are you wiring up their homes? Are you putting technology in there? What are you doing?
We have over 400 volunteer homes participating in something kind of like a pharmaceutical clinical trials effort, but with smart grid. So we put in circuit panel based systems that capture 15-second to 1-minute interval data from 6 to 24 circuits. And then it all feeds into the Lone Star 4 supercomputer at the University of Texas's Advanced Computing Center. With that, researchers and corporate labs are able to work with real people to find out, what can we learn from electricity data that could create all sorts of exciting new third-party apps.
From a consumer point of view, were some of these people in the houses, did they have a preconception about how they were using energy, and have you shown them that things they thought they were good at, they weren't really good at?
Sort of. I think the big one is that a lot of people thought they cared more about energy than they really did. But on the other hand, that energy data is incredibly important for figuring out, do I have a problem with some appliance where it's not working? And do I have someone in my home when there's not supposed to be anyone in my home? Is there, what kind of personalized home improvement recommendations should I get based on how my electric data is showing what's going on? I'll give you an example. We found out that in about half our homes, which are new and green built, that they weren't performing any better than older non-green built homes. And it's because their ducts were all leaking, even on new homes. But there's no feedback mechanism to tell you that that's happening. So it turns out with smart meter data, that can be picked up instantaneously using software.
Oh, that's great. So now you just did a One Great Idea presentation on stage. So why don't you give us a little record of that or a recall of that?
Sure. With smart grid, we're in the third big digitization of a grid in a generation. With cable in the early 1990s, and then with mobile telecom in the last decade, those grids went from analog grids to digital grids. But they had kind of predictable stumbles where they first tried to do it themselves in terms of offering all of the applications, and then ultimately they opened up their grids to third-party app developers. And that's what made possible the Googles and Amazons and eBays in the case of cable television, and then in the case of mobile telecom, it was app stores, where all of the new third-party innovators were using those grids to compete with incumbent industries in ways that were not anticipated and had virtually nothing to do with the grid that they were using. It's just that grid had capabilities which provided a strategic advantage. So we're close to that point in the electric grid in particular, and what we're laying out is a path of, okay, here is the path of how we get to that point where third-party app developers can access, with the customer's permission, the capabilities of this new smart grid to solve all sorts of commercially useful problems for people that really aren't in the discussion yet.
And so who is coming together to sort of fund you and support your research efforts?
Our 12 full-time employees and our research team of over 40 people is funded through a mixture of corporate support from our consortium members, largely from consumer electronics companies and utilities, and then also from some support from major support from the U.S. Department of Energy, foundation support such as from the Dorstig Charitable Foundation, which is funding research by us on how people in older homes are using electricity and how information impacted the kind of home improvements they made.
So how fast do you think we'll see change? I mean, in California, we've seen a large deployment of smart meters all around the state. So once that infrastructure gets put in, how fast will we start seeing these apps show up and helping people change their behavior?
I think that we are pretty close right now. In particular with what's happening in Green Button, it's almost kind of a cross the Rubicon moment where we've gone from, in the case of cable television in particular, they had all sorts of applications when they went to digital cable, but they were all controlled by the cable companies, and then they opened it to third-party developers to use it for broadband internet. In the case of Smart Grid with Green Button, we're at that moment now. So the data that's available from Green Button is not very high resolution data, but it's still an important moment. I think the big thing is going to be when we get to the example of something like what happened with cable routers and digital cable, where when you get that kind of robust data that's possible from a hub device that pairs the meter, you can find out, do I have a gas leak? Do I have a water leak? Do I, what kind of home improvements should I prioritize? The one we always like to say is, if you're the parents of high school age kids and you leave town for the weekend, on Saturday night at 10:30 on your smartphone, you get an alert from an app and it said, your toilet is flushed 45 times in the last hour. Well, you know your water bill, but you've developed other insights about what's happening in your home.